Queen Grace knelt alone by the river. The water was quiet but powerful. A soft wind blew through the trees. From the middle of the river, a glowing figure slowly rose from the mist. It was the river goddess. Her body was made of water and light. Her voice was calm but strong. "Queen of men, you have come to beg for a son," the goddess said. "Yes, great goddess," Grace replied. "Please help me. My husband wants a male child. He has given me 1 month to get pregnant or he will bring another wife into the palace." The goddess looked deep into Grace's heart. "I can give you what you want. You shall have a son. But nothing comes for free. There is a price." Grace nodded quickly. "I will pay it. Whatever it is." The goddess stepped forward. "Listen carefully. I have a son. He is strong, wise, and full of power. But his face is like a monster. No woman will marry him. They all run away in fear. He is my child, and he is alone." Grace looked shocked. "What does this mean? If I help you have a son, then one of your daughters, one of the princesses, must marry my son when the time comes." Grace's heart shook, but she looked back at the palace in her mind. She thought about the king's anger, the fear of being cast out, the shame, the pain. "I accept," she said. "If you give me a son, I promise one of my daughters will marry your son." The goddess smiled, but her eyes were full of secrets. "So be it." Then she vanished into the water. That day, Queen Grace sat alone in the royal garden. She was thinking about her daughters, Ella, Ruth, and Miriam. They were all beautiful, smart, and kind. The sound of footsteps made her turn her head. It was King Richard, her husband. His face looked angry. He walked straight to her and stood like a mountain. "We need to talk," he said. Grace stood up quickly. "Yes, my king." He didn't sit. He didn't smile. His voice was heavy. "Do you know what people are saying in the kingdom? They are laughing at me. They say I am weak because I have no male child. They say the throne will fall because I have no heir." "My king, please," Grace said softly. "We have 3 daughters. Are they not enough? They love you deeply." "The law does not pass the crown to a woman," he said. "I am king, and I must leave a strong son behind. My enemies are watching. They wait for me to die so they can fight over my throne." "But times are changing," Grace said. "Our daughters are smart. Ella will make a great ruler. So will Ruth. And Miriam." "Enough!" the king shouted. "I gave you time. I gave you chances. But now I am done waiting." Grace looked at him with wide, teary eyes. "What are you saying?" "I am saying this," the king said. "You have 1 month to become pregnant. If you are not carrying a male child by then, I will bring another woman into this palace. She will be my second wife, and she will give me a son." Grace stepped back. It felt like her chest had been stabbed. "You want to replace me? I want a son," he replied. "Do not make me wait longer." He turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the garden. Her knees became weak, and she fell to the ground. She wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. The next morning, she went to the servants' quarters and found Martha, an old woman who once worked in the palace. Martha was wise. She knew many old stories about spirits and gods. Grace sat beside her and held her hand. "Martha," she whispered, "I need help." "What is it, my queen?" Martha asked. "The king said if I don't give him a son in 1 month, he will take another wife. I cannot lose him. I cannot lose everything I have." Martha looked around to make sure no one was listening. Then she leaned closer. "There is one who can help. The river goddess." Grace looked confused. "A goddess?" "Yes, the river of whispers. She lives deep in the forest. She helps women have children. But be careful. She always asks for something in return." Grace nodded. "I will go. I have no choice." 3 days later, just before sunrise, Grace dressed in plain clothes and walked alone to the riverside. Finally, she reached the river. It was quiet and calm. Queen Grace stood at the riverbank, her heart beating fast. She knelt down and touched the water with her fingers. The water felt warm and gentle, like it was waiting for her. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Great goddess of the river, I am Queen Grace, wife of King Richard. I have come to beg you for help. I need a male child. Please hear my cry." Suddenly the river began to move. The water swirled in circles, and a soft mist rose from its surface. Then slowly, from the middle of the river, a glowing figure appeared. She was tall and shining like the moon. Her body looked like water. Her hair flowed like waves. Her eyes were deep and full of power. Queen Grace looked up in awe and fear. She knew this was the river goddess. The goddess spoke. Her voice was calm but strong. "Why have you come, Queen of Men? What do you seek?" Grace bowed her head. "Great goddess, I have come because I am in pain. My husband has warned me that if I do not give him a son, he will take another wife. I have given him 3 daughters, but he wants a boy to carry his name and rule the kingdom after him. I do not want to lose my place in his heart or in the palace. I need a male child. Please help me." The goddess looked at her closely, her eyes glowing. "You want a son. Many have come to me asking the same, but what will you give in return? Nothing is free. Not even the breath in your body. If I help you, what will you sacrifice?" Grace did not move. She kept her eyes down and said, "Anything. Anything you ask, I will give. I just need a son, to save my home." The river goddess walked closer, her feet never touching the ground. "My gift comes with a price. Listen carefully. I have a son. He is strong and full of wisdom, but his face is not like others. He looks like a beast, and all women fear him. They run from him. No one wants to marry him. He is alone and sad. Though his heart is pure, he is hated for his looks." Grace stared in silence, confused by the goddess's words. The goddess continued, "If I help you have a son, then, when the time comes, one of your daughters must marry my son. It will be their duty, their fate. It is the only way he will not be alone. It is the only way I will help you." Grace's heart beat faster. She thought of her daughters, Ella, Ruth, and Miriam. They were still young, still full of dreams. But the fear of losing everything was stronger. She thought of the king, his words, his anger. She thought of the cold look in his eyes when he said 1 month. She could not risk it. She had to act. "I accept," Grace said, her voice low but sure. "If you give me a son, one of my daughters will marry your son. I promise this, on my name and on my life." The goddess stared into her soul, then slowly smiled. "So be it. You shall have your son. But remember your promise. Promises made to the river cannot be broken. If you forget, the river will remind you." With that, the goddess raised her hands. Water swirled around Grace like a hug, full of warmth and magic. And then, everything became calm again. The goddess faded into the mist, her voice echoing one last time, "You shall have your son, but the river always comes to collect." Grace sat there for a long time, her heart heavy, her mind full of thoughts. She had done what she had to do. She had made the sacrifice. Now all she could do was wait, and pray that the river's gift would not become a curse. Then slowly, she stood, wiped her tears, and began the long journey back to the palace. The deal had been made. The seed had been planted. Her life would never be the same again. After 3 weeks, she woke up feeling sick. Her head spun. Her body was heavy. She could not eat her morning fruit. The smell of food made her feel like throwing up. She became tired easily. A doctor was called. He checked her body and smiled wide. "My queen," he said, "you are with child." Grace covered her mouth in shock, her eyes filled with tears. She looked up at the sky and whispered, Thank you, goddess." The king was told the news. He rushed into her chambers like a boy full of joy. He knelt beside her bed, held her hands, and kissed her forehead. "You have saved my heart," he said. "You have saved the throne." Grace smiled, but deep inside, her heart trembled. She remembered the glowing eyes of the goddess. She remembered the soft but firm voice. "One of your daughters must marry my son." That night, while the king slept beside her, Grace sat up in bed, holding her belly. It felt warm, full of life. She whispered to the baby, "You are a gift, but also a price. I love you already, but I fear what you may bring." 9 months later, Grace gave birth to a bouncing baby boy. His name was Ethan. He was strong, beautiful, and full of life. The whole palace celebrated with joy. Drums were played. Dancers filled the royal grounds. The king smiled more than he ever had before. "My son, my heir," King Richard said proudly. "The future of the throne is safe." Grace smiled too, but deep in her heart she never forgot the deal she made by the river. Years passed quickly. Ethan was 10 years old. He was brave, smart, and loved by many. One quiet evening, Queen Grace sat alone in her royal room. Suddenly the air in her room changed. It became cold. The candles flickered without wind. Then the room filled with soft mist. A soft voice spoke behind her. "My daughter, I am here." Grace turned quickly. Her heart jumped. Standing in front of her was the river goddess. Her body still glowed like water. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were serious. "My daughter," the goddess said again, "I hope you have not forgotten your promise." Grace stood up slowly. Her hands began to shake. "No, I have not forgotten," she whispered. "The time is now," the goddess said. "My son is ready. One of your daughters must marry him." Grace's legs became weak. She sat on her chair. "Please, great goddess. They are still young. Can't we wait a little longer?" The goddess shook her head. "You made a promise. You swore on your name and on your life. My son has waited long enough. The world has rejected him. But you gave your word." Grace looked down. Her heart was full of fear. She remembered the goddess's words clearly. Promises made to the river cannot be broken. "But how will I choose?" Grace asked. "Which one of my daughters must marry him?" "That is for you to decide," said the goddess. "But choose soon. My son is coming. He will visit your palace in 3 days. When he comes, the one who is chosen must be ready." Grace looked up. "Please, goddess, tell me. What is he like now? Has he changed?" The goddess smiled sadly. "His face still scares others, but his heart is pure. He is strong, wise, and kind. He will love her deeply, but the world judges what it sees, not what is inside. Do not break your promise because of fear." Grace nodded slowly. "I understand." The mist began to fade. The air became warm again. Before the goddess disappeared, she said one last thing. "If you fail to keep your word, the river will not forgive. The river always comes to collect." Then she was gone. Grace sat still for a long time. Her heart beat fast. She looked out of the window and saw her daughters laughing together. How could she choose? How could she tell them the truth? And how would they feel when they met the son of the river? Queen Grace could not sleep all night. She turned left and right on her bed. Her heart was full of worry. She could not stop thinking about the goddess's visit. She had only 3 days to choose which daughter would marry the river's son. She knew she could not make the decision alone. She needed to tell her husband. She needed to confess everything. The next morning she dressed in her royal robe and went straight to the king's chamber. King Richard was sitting alone. When he saw her, he smiled and said, "Good morning, my queen. You look troubled. What is it?" Grace stood quietly for a moment, then walked to him and said, "My king, I have something to tell you. Something I should have told you years ago." He looked up, confused. "What is it?" Grace took a deep breath. "Do you remember 10 years ago, when you gave me 1 month to become pregnant, or you would take another wife?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, of course. I remember. I was afraid. I felt alone. I didn't want to lose you, or the palace, or my daughters. So I went to the River of Whispers. I went to the goddess." The king's eyes widened. "You did what?" "I begged her for a son. I told her I would do anything. And she agreed to help me. But she asked for something in return." "What did she ask for?" he asked, his voice already rising. Grace looked down. "She said one of our daughters must marry her son when the time comes." The king stood up quickly. "What? You promised our daughter to a river creature? You went that far? How could you, Grace? How could you go behind my back and make such a deal?" Grace's voice cracked. "You pushed me to it. You told me you would bring another wife if I didn't give you a son. You made me feel useless. What choice did I have?" The king was shaking with anger. "You should have allowed me to marry another woman. It would have been better than this madness. You promised our daughters, our princesses, to a beast." Grace stood tall. "Don't blame me alone. I did it to protect our family, our name, our throne. You think I wanted to do this? You think it was easy?" The king turned away. "Do you know what people say about that thing? That monster she calls a son? I've heard horrible things. They say his voice can unalive a man, that when he speaks, fire comes out, that his eyes can make warriors faint, that he was cursed at birth." Grace held back tears. "The goddess said his heart is pure. He is kind and wise. The world fears his face, not his soul." "I don't care," the king shouted. "He is not marrying any of my daughters. I am the king, and I said no." Grace stepped forward. "You can't stop it. The goddess is coming to collect. She said if I break my promise, the river will not forgive. She warned me, Richard. The river always comes to collect." The king pointed at her, his eyes red with fury. "Then you marry him! You made the promise, not me. If you love the river so much, go and be his queen. But my daughters, my princesses, will never marry a monster. Grace slapped her hand on the table. Don't you dare call him a monster. You don't even know him. The king's voice dropped, cold and sharp. I don't need to know him. I know enough. And I know that this palace will not accept him. The people will reject him. The council will never approve. Our enemies will laugh at us. A beast in the royal family? Never. Grace's tears finally fell. So you would rather break a sacred promise? You would rather fight a goddess than let your daughter marry a man with a strange face, but a kind heart? I would rather fight 1,000 gods than give my daughter to a creature from the river. The king said. They stood in silence, breathing heavily, both in pain. Finally, the king turned away and said, Do whatever you want. But don't bring him to me. Don't bring him near my throne. If the river dares come, we will face it. But I will not bless this marriage. He left the room. Grace fell into a chair, her hands shaking. She had hoped he would understand. But now, she was alone again. The countdown had begun. In 3 days, the river's son would arrive. The question was no longer who he would marry. It was, would anyone accept him at all? Grace called her daughters the next morning. Within minutes, Ella, Ruth, and Miriam stood before her in her private room. She looked each one in the eye. Sit down. I have something to tell you. We're fine standing, Ella said. Speak, mother, Ruth added. What's going on? Grace didn't waste time. 10 years ago, when I couldn't give the king a son and he threatened to take another wife, I went to the River of Whispers. I begged the goddess for help. I made a promise. What kind of promise? Ella asked sharply. I promised her that if she gave me a male child, one of my daughters would marry her son when the time came. That time is now. He is coming. One of you must marry him. They all stared at her. The room went silent for a second. Then suddenly, What? Ella Grotto. You did what? You promised us to a river creature? Ruth asked, her voice rising. You gave us away? Miriam said. You didn't even ask us? You didn't even think? Grace tried to explain, but they didn't let her speak. No, Ella said, shaking her head. Never. I've heard about him. People say he's not even human. They say he's ugly, worse than a beast. I heard he's taller than a tree, Ruth said, that his face is full of scales, and his breath stinks like rotten fish. I heard he has claws instead of hands, Miriam added, and when he speaks, birds fall from the sky. Do you want us to be unalived, mother? Grace raised her hand. Stop talking like that. You don't even know him. Ella stepped forward. We don't need to know him. I'm not marrying a monster, never. Neither am I, Ruth said. Never in my life. I will not do it. Count me out, Miriam said, crossing her arms. We're not river wives. We are princesses. We belong to this land, not to the water. Grace's eyes filled with tears. I did this for us. I was desperate. I had no choice. The king gave you options, Ella cut in. You just didn't like them. You chose to give us away instead. Exactly, Ruth said. You didn't want to share the palace with another woman, so you used us as the price. Honestly, Miriam said, staring straight into her mother's eyes, I think you should marry him. Grace blinked. What? You made the promise, Miriam said coldly. You're the genesis of all this. You opened the door. Go and keep it open. Go and be his wife. She's right, Ella said. If you love the promise so much, marry him yourself. We're not doing it. You gave your word, not us, Ruth added. You will wear the wedding dress. You live in the river. Leave us out of it. Grace collapsed into her chair. You don't understand. No, you don't understand, Ella said. We don't care if the river floods this palace. We're not marrying that creature. Never. We are not your sacrifices, Ruth said. You broke our hearts long before the goddess arrives, Miriam whispered. You didn't just make a promise. You broke us. They turned and walked out of the room one by one. Grace didn't stop them. She didn't have the strength. She sat alone in silence. The voice of the river whispered once again. Time is now. Everyone in the kingdom felt it. Something ancient, something powerful, something that could not be stopped was coming. But only one man stepped outside. King Richard. He wore his gold-trimmed robe, his crown tight on his head, and his sharpest sword at his waist. He did not take guards. He did not take advisors. He walked into the courtyard alone, his hands clenched, his eyes hard, his jaw tight. He had waited for this moment. The man his foolish wife had invited into their lives was coming, the River Prince, and he would face him alone. And then, Without sound or warning, the ground at the far end of the courtyard opened slightly. From the mist, the River Prince stepped out. He was tall, too tall. His feet didn't make a sound. His body moved like smoke and water. His shoulders were broad, his arms long, his fingers sharp like carved stone. But it was his face that made even the king take a small step back. The left side was noble, clean, proud. The right side was ruined, burned, twisted, shaped by magic no human could understand. He walked until he stood in the center of the courtyard, did not bow.
He did not speak first. He simply stood. Then the king stepped forward. "You came," King Richard said, his voice cold. "I said I would," the River Prince replied. "You were not invited," the king said. "I was promised," the prince said. "You will not touch my daughters," the king growled. "You will not see them. You will not speak to them." "I have not come to speak to them," said the River Prince. "I have come for the one who was promised." "You think I'll hand over my daughter to you?" the king barked, taking another step forward. "You think you can walk into my home and take my blood?" "I think your wife made a promise," said the prince, "and I have come to collect." "Over my dead body," the king hissed. The River Prince did not flinch. "That can be arranged." The king's hand moved to his sword. "Say that again." "I said the dead speak to the river every day," the River Prince said calmly. "They scream from the bottom of the water, and none of them ever thought they'd end there." The king drew his sword halfway. "I am not afraid of you." "Yes, you are," the prince said. "Your heart is beating too fast. Your hand is sweating on your sword. Your mouth is dry. You are afraid. You come here with your cursed face and your monster eyes," the king spat. "You scare my people. You want to marry a royal daughter when you belong in the wild." "I belong where I was promised," the River Prince said. "A deal was made. One life for another. A son for a daughter. I was told the eldest would be mine. I have waited 10 years. "My daughters are princesses," the king snapped. "You are a mistake." "I am a promise," said the prince. "A promise kept. I am what your wife begged for when you pushed her to the edge." "She should have let me take another wife," the king shouted. "At least I would not be dealing with this." The prince stepped forward. Just one step. The thunder cracked. The king stood still. "You would have had another wife," the prince said, "and she may have given you a son, but not this one, not Ethan, not the boy born with light in his blood and the river in his spirit." "I don't care," the king shouted. "Ethan is mine, but none of my daughters will be yours." "You do not own them," the River Prince said. "They are mine," the king roared, "and they will never see you. You are not a prince. You are a warning." The River Prince smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "Then you should listen." "I said enough," the king yelled. "Get out of my courtyard before I run you through." "You want to fight the river?" the prince asked. "Then draw your sword. Let the earth drink your pride." The king pulled his sword out fully, blade shining in the gray light. "I will cut you down." The River Prince did not move. "Strike me and the river will rise. Break the promise and the goddess will come. Refuse me and the ground will open under your palace." The wind returned, loud and sharp. The king held his sword high. His chest moved fast with breath, but he did not strike. The River Prince stared into his eyes. "You fear what I look like. You call me ugly, but you have no idea what beauty costs. I carry my scars in the open. You carry yours inside." "I said leave," the king shouted. The River Prince stepped back. One step. "You will hear from us." The sky cracked with thunder again. "I will be back," the prince said. "Not to beg, not to ask, but to take what is mine." He turned. His robe flowed behind him like a river. He vanished into the mist, swallowed by silence. The king stood in the courtyard, sword still in hand, his heart still pounding. Sweat ran down his back. He turned and walked back into the palace. He did not speak to anyone. He did not sleep that night. And deep down he knew the prince would return, and this time he might not come alone. 2 days after the River Prince left the palace, the kingdom began to break. The river dried up, the same river that flowed for centuries, through mountains and valleys, now cracked like dry skin. The fish that once danced through its waters lay dead on the dry mud. The fishermen dropped their nets and fell to their knees. The crops turned brown. The cassava fields, the yam hills, the rows of millet, all wilted under the hot, angry sun. The farmers wept in the fields. The harvest was gone. The animals died. The goats bleated and dropped. The cows stopped walking. Chickens lay still, eyes open, wings stiff. No one knew what to do. No one had ever seen anything like this. The people began to whisper. They gathered in corners. They prayed. Some shouted, some cursed. Some said the gods were angry. The air was filled with fear, with questions. Then the chief priest arrived. He marched straight into the palace with fire in his eyes and dust on his feet. He found the king sitting alone in the royal chamber, sweat on his face, his crown crooked. "My king," the priest said, his voice full of thunder, "this land is cursed." The king looked up, his voice weak. "I know. The river is gone. My people are crying. My horses won't eat. The wells are dry. I don't understand." "The gods understand," the priest said. The king stood. "What do they say?" The priest stepped closer. "They say your wife is the cause of all this. Queen Grace, the woman who went to the river of whispers, the woman who made a vow and broke it." The king froze. The priest's voice grew louder. "Your wife promised her daughter to the son of the river. The river kept its end, but your family turned away. Your palace mocked the prince. You refused the deal, and now the gods have turned their backs on us." The king grabbed his staff. "It was not my fault. I didn't make the promise." "But you broke it," the priest said. "The river came for peace. You met it with insults and pride, and now the goddess is angry. The gods are angry. The land is dying. My king, act fast now. Do something before this kingdom is no more." The king sat back down, breathing hard. "What do I do?" "Call the queen," the priest said. "Call your daughters. Choose one. Let the promise be fulfilled. Before the river takes more than just water, before your people come with fire and stones." The king stood again, eyes wide. "The villagers are angry?" "Very," the priest said. "My lord, they blame the palace. They blame the queen. They will rise soon. They are shouting your name in the marketplace, but not in praise. Act now, before they come to drag your throne into the mud." That night the palace was quiet, but the kingdom was not. Outside the walls, people were shouting. Fires were lit in the village square. Inside the palace, the king sat alone. He had not eaten. He had not slept. His hands trembled. He didn't know what to do. The gods were angry. The people were turning against him. He feared the day they would break through the gates. Then the door opened. Miriam, the youngest daughter, walked in slowly. Her face was calm, but her eyes were strong. She walked straight to her father and stood tall. "Father," she said, "I will marry him." The king looked up, shocked. "What?" "I will marry the river prince," she repeated. "I will fulfill the promise." "No," the king shouted, standing up. "Never. I won't let that happen." "Father, listen to me," Miriam said. "The river is dry. The crops are gone. The animals are dead. Our people are crying, suffering, dying. If I don't do this, everything will be lost." "You're just a child," he said. "My last daughter, my little girl. You don't understand what you're saying." "I do, father," she said. "I know what I'm doing." The king shook his head. "You don't know what that creature is. You haven't seen his face. He's not like us. He's from the river. His blood is water. His body is filled with magic. What if he hurts you? What if you're never the same again?" "Father," she said gently, "I'm not afraid." He looked at her, heartbroken. "Oh, my precious daughter. What if something happens to you?" She took his hand. "Then it happens. But I must try. I have to save our people. I have to do what is right. If we do nothing, everyone will suffer. If I go, maybe the river will forgive. Maybe the land will live again." The king held her hands tightly. "Please, there must be another way." "There isn't," she said softly. "We are out of time." He looked into her eyes, and for the first time, he saw something in her that he hadn't seen before. Courage. Real courage. The kind of courage queens are made of. He took a deep breath and nodded slowly. "Then so be it," he whispered. Miriam hugged him. He held her like he never wanted to let go. "You are braver than I ever was," he said. "I am your daughter," she replied. The sun rose slowly the next morning. For the first time in many days, the sky was clear. The wind was calm. The drums in the village had stopped. Word had spread quickly. The youngest princess, Miriam, had agreed to marry the river prince. Some people cried, some cheered, others prayed, but everyone waited. Miriam stood in her chamber, wearing a plain white dress. Her sisters stood beside her, quiet and ashamed. They had refused. They had shouted. But now they looked at their sister with respect. She had done what they couldn't. "I'm sorry," Ella whispered. "You're stronger than us." Ruth held her hand. "If anything happens, we will come for you." Miriam smiled. "Nothing will happen. This is what I must do." Outside the palace, the king waited with his daughter. The chief priest stood by his side, holding a staff carved with ancient signs. The people of the village lined the roads, silent, heads bowed. The king looked at his daughter. "Are you ready?" "Yes," Miriam said. They walked to the river, or what used to be the river. It was still dry. The ground cracked under their feet. But when Miriam stepped onto the riverbed, something changed. The air grew cool. A soft mist rose from the ground. The dry earth began to shine. Then from the far end of the riverbank, he came. The river prince. He walked slowly but with power. As he came closer, the king stood in front of him. Their eyes met again. But this time the king said nothing. He looked at Miriam, then stepped back. The river prince looked at her. "You came," he said. "I gave my word," she replied. "Are you afraid?" he asked. "No," she said. "But I want one thing." "What is it?" "Peace," she said. "For my people, for my father, for the land." "You shall have it," the river prince said. He reached out his hand. She took it. As soon as their hands touched, the river roared. Water exploded from the dry cracks. It rushed around their feet, clear and clean. The mud turned to waves. Fish swam through the water. The river had returned. After the king turned and walked away from the river. Heart heavy but full of silent pride, the river prince gently held Miriam's hand and led her away. The river had returned. The land was healing, and the people had hope again. But for Miriam, everything she knew had just changed. She didn't know where he was taking her, but she didn't ask. Her heart was calm. Her steps were steady. They walked deep into the forest. After a long walk, they arrived at a small, quiet clearing. In the center stood a beautiful hut. It had walls made of clean, polished mud and a roof of green leaves tied together with golden vines. Flowers of all colors surrounded it. The air smelled sweet. The sky above was open and blue. Miriam stopped and stared. "This is your home?" she asked. The river prince smiled. "Yes." She blinked. "Aren't you supposed to live in the river? Underwater? In some deep cave?" He laughed softly. "I'm not a fish. I'm not a monster. I'm human like you. Just different." She looked at his face. "What do you mean different?" He stepped closer. "You'll understand soon. I have walked through fire and water. I don't live under the river. I live near it. I protect it. That is my home, but it doesn't control me. I choose peace. That's why I brought you here." Miriam stood in silence, as surprised, confused, but not afraid. She followed him into the hut. Inside it was beautiful, simple, quiet, and peaceful. "Do you like it?" he asked. She nodded. "It's not what I expected." He smiled. "You expected chains, darkness, a cage." "Yes," she whispered. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. "I waited 10 years for someone who could look at me and not run. You came, not because you had to, but because you wanted peace. I respect that, and I will protect you." Miriam sat down on the mat, her eyes softening. "I hope I made the right choice." "You did," he said. Meanwhile, back at the palace, everything was not peaceful. In the queen's chamber, Grace sat quietly, praying for her daughter. She had not eaten. Her hands trembled. The king stood outside, pacing. No one spoke to them. No one dared to ask questions. But in another part of the palace, In a quiet room filled with perfume and fine clothes, the two older princesses sat laughing. Finally, Ella said, Father's favorite is gone. She always acted like she was better than everyone, Ruth said. Now look at her, gone with a river monster, Ella Rio. She thinks she's the savior of this kingdom. She gave away her happiness for this useless land. For people who don't even care, what a fool. I'm just waiting, Ruth said. Soon mother and father will start fighting. They'll blame each other. Then this palace will turn to ashes. Ella Sanrio. Honestly, your mother is foolish. How can she make the kind of nonsense decision? Making a promise without thinking of what it would cost her daughters. I thank God, Ruth said, that Daddy's favorite is finally gone. Let's sit and watch what happens next. I know that beast will unalive her, Ella said. He'll probably eat her body and leave her bones floating in the river. I know, right? Ruth said. Even though she's our sister, I never really liked her. I envied her, Ella said without shame. All the men in the village admired her. They said she was the most beautiful among us, that she was more respectful, more disciplined. Can you imagine? Ruth said. Even the chief's son said she was the only one in the palace worth marrying, but now she's gone forever. They laughed, not a soft laugh, not a laugh of sadness, a laugh filled with jealousy, relief, and cruelty. Back in the forest, the river prince stood outside the hut, staring at the stars. Inside, Miriam couldn't sleep. She lay in the soft bed, thinking about home. She missed her sisters. She missed her mother, her father, her brother. She missed the palace, the bright lights, the sounds of celebration. She didn't regret her choice, but she was afraid of the future. Suddenly, she heard a sound. She got up and walked to the window. Outside, the river prince was kneeling by the stream, speaking in a language she couldn't understand. The stream glowed with blue light. A strong breeze blew through the trees, and fireflies danced in the air. She watched him closely. He looked strong, yes, but also sad, alone, just like her. He finished his words and looked up at the stars. Then he stood and walked back toward the hut. Miriam quickly moved away from the window and returned to bed. She closed her eyes and pretended to be asleep. He stepped into the room and sat down in the corner. You don't have to pretend, he said softly. She opened her eyes. I wasn't going to hurt you, he said. I just wanted you to rest. I can't sleep, she whispered. Why? I miss home, he nodded. I know that feeling well. She looked up at him. His face still scared her a little, but his words didn't. His voice was steady, kind, true. Back at the palace, the days were quiet, but Queen Grace's heart was heavy. Her daughters, Ella and Ruth, walked around like nothing had happened. They smiled, they laughed. They wore their finest clothes and painted their faces as if it were a festival. There was no sign of sadness, no sign of care for their sister Miriam, who had gone into the unknown for the sake of them all. Queen Grace watched them closely. Day after day, she hoped to hear one of them say, I miss her, or do you think she's safe? But nothing came. One afternoon, she found them in the royal garden, sitting under a tree and laughing like everything was fine. She stepped forward and stood before them. You're smiling? She said sharply. Your sister is with some beast in the river, far away from home, and you sit here smiling? Ella rolled her eyes. Ruth looked away. She's the one who went there, not us, Ella said. Why should we be bothered? You should be ashamed of yourself, the queen snapped. No, Ruth said, standing up. You should be ashamed of yourself. You caused all this. You made a promise you couldn't keep. You pushed your own daughter to go and clean up your mess. You destroyed this family, Ella added. So don't come here and act like you're better than us. Queen Grace's mouth opened slightly. She could not believe what she was hearing. You think I destroyed this family? She asked. Yes, Ruth said. And now your favorite child is gone forever. Who cares? She's fine, Ella said. She chose to go. Now we have peace, and all the handsome, wealthy men in the village are finally noticing us. Yes, Ruth said, laughing. Those men never looked at us when Miriam was around. They only had eyes for her. They called her the beautiful one, the wise one, the respectful one. Can you imagine how that felt? They ignored us, Ella said. Now the gods have answered our prayers. She's gone, and we can finally shine. Queen Grace stared at them with wide eyes. So that's what this is about? Jealousy? Call it what you want, Ruth said. All we know is that we're finally free. Free from what? The queen asked. From your own sister? From someone who would give her life for yours? She made her choice, Ella said. Let her stay there with her river husband. Maybe she'll grow gills and become a fish. The queen's voice rose. Enough! They both froze. Queen Grace took a step closer. Her eyes were full of fire. I know I made a mistake. I know I failed as a mother when I made that promise. I thought I was bad. I thought I had done the worst thing a mother could do. But now I see something worse. I see it in you. You two are the true shame of this house. You have no love, no heart, no honor. Your sister saved us all, and this is how you thank her? She's not even dead, Ella muttered. She might as well be, Ruth added. You will regret this, Queen Grace said, her voice shaking. The gods see everything, and they do not bless wicked hearts. She turned and walked away, tears in her eyes. 2 weeks passed and everything began to change. Miriam, once afraid and unsure, now laughed freely. She no longer counted the days. She no longer cried at night. The fear that lived in her chest had melted into something else, something warm, something bright. She found herself looking forward to the mornings, when the river prince brought her fresh fruit, when they walked through the woods, and when he told her stories of the river and the stars. She didn't know when it happened, or how it even began. But it happened. She fell in love. He was still the same. That evening, they sat by the small stream outside the hut. She watched him smiling. He turned to her. Why are you staring? He asked playfully. She smiled. I need to tell you something. He paused. What is it? Her heart raced. Her hands were cold, but her voice was steady. I love you. His hand froze midair. He blinked. You what? I love you, she said again. I don't know how it started. I don't know why. But it's there, it's real. I love you. He stared at her, shocked. You love a monster like me? She stepped closer. You're not a monster. You never were. I see your scars, but they're not what I focus on. I see your soul. I see your kindness. And I love you. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could answer, she leaned forward and kissed him. And the moment their lips touched, everything changed. A blinding light burst around them like the sun had fallen into the forest. Miriam pulled back, shocked. What's happening? The river prince gasped. His face, once twisted and marked by the river's magic, began to smooth. His scars vanished, his skin became clean, his hair grew long and soft. His entire body shifted before her eyes. The cursed river prince disappeared, and standing before her was a new man, tall, handsome, strong, glowing with life and royalty. He looked at his hands, touched his face, breathed deep. Then he looked at her. I'm free, he whispered. It's over. The curse is broken. Miriam took a step back. What curse? He walked toward her, slowly, his eyes full of tears. Let me tell you everything now. She nodded, still stunned. My name is not River Prince. My real name is Prince Jackson of the Four Hills Kingdom, a land far beyond the mountains. 10 years ago, my mother, Queen Melinda, made a deal with the river goddess. She begged for power to win a war. The goddess helped her, but in return, she was told to give me in marriage to a daughter of fate, an ordinary girl from a poor family. He paused. My mother refused. She said I would marry a princess, not a farmer's daughter. She broke the promise. She mocked the goddess. And so I was cursed. The goddess twisted my face and my form. She said I would walk the earth alone, feared, hated, rejected. And I would only be healed if a woman loved me truly, not for my looks or my crown, but for my heart. He stepped closer. No one ever did. Until now. Miriam's mouth was open in shock. So you're a real prince? Yes, he said. And thanks to you, I'm whole again. You didn't see a beast. You saw me. I never knew, she said softly. I didn't want you to know, he replied. If you loved me, I wanted it to be real. Not because I was royal, not because I was handsome, but because you felt it in your soul. I did, she whispered, And I still do. He took her hand. Then thank you, my princess. You've saved me. I've been waiting 10 years for this moment. She smiled. I've only known you for weeks, but I feel like I've known you forever. He kissed her forehead. Now I am free, and we are together. The curse was broken. The promise was fulfilled. And two hearts, once strangers, were now soulmates. 3 days later, the kingdom of King Richard stood still that morning. People were just waking up. Then they saw it. A golden carriage rolled through the village gates, pulled by two shining white horses. And inside the carriage sat Princess Miriam. But she was not alone. Beside her sat a man, tall and handsome man. His face was calm and noble. His eyes were kind. The people ran behind the carriage shouting, "She's back! Princess Miriam is back!" The palace gates opened wide. King Richard and Queen Grace stood waiting at the steps, holding each other's hands. Their eyes were wide with shock. For a moment the king could not move. His daughter, whom he thought he might never see again, was walking toward him. And not only was she smiling, she was glowing. She stepped forward and knelt at her father's feet. "Rise, my daughter," King Richard said, pulling her into his arms. "I thought I lost you forever." She smiled. "But you didn't." He looked over her shoulder at the man beside her. "Who is this?" Miriam turned. She held the man's hand proudly and said, "Father, this is the River Prince." The king stepped back in shock. "Him? But he's—" "I know," Miriam said. "He was under a curse. The beast you saw, the face you feared, that wasn't his true self. He was trapped in a form the river gave him because his own mother broke a promise to the goddess." Prince Jackson stepped forward and bowed. "Your Majesty, I am Prince Jackson of the Four Hills Kingdom. I was cursed to walk the earth alone unless a woman truly loved me for who I am. Your daughter broke the curse with her love. She saw past my face. She saw my soul. She saved me." Queen Grace held her hands over her mouth, weeping with joy. The king looked at him with awe. "So, you are not just a river prince. You are royalty." "Yes," Jackson said, "and your daughter is now the queen of my kingdom, my equal, my heart." The king smiled and hugged them both. Then today is a day of celebration. The palace rejoiced. Drums rolled. Dancers filled the courtyard. The villagers poured into the palace gates with gifts and flowers. Songs of Miriam's bravery were sung from every corner. But not everyone was smiling. Ella and Ruth stood at the palace balcony staring in disbelief. Their jaws dropped. That's the River Prince," Ruth said. "He's so handsome," Ella whispered. They both stepped back, faces twisted with shock and jealousy. "I can't believe this," Ruth said. "She's back, and she's even more powerful now." "She's now a queen," Ella said bitterly. "A real one." "She married a prince," Ruth added, "and broke a curse. Now the whole kingdom loves her," Ella muttered. "Again." "They're calling her the real queen," Ruth said. "Again. She wins. Always." They both stood in silence. The gods had indeed answered, but not their prayers. Miriam had returned stronger than ever. That evening, under the bright full moon, Miriam stood with Prince Jackson at the palace gate. "I'll miss them," she said softly, looking at her parents, her little brother, the people cheering. "I know," Jackson replied, holding her hand. "But our new home awaits," she smiled. "A palace of peace." They entered the golden carriage. As they rode away, the villagers clapped and sang. And far away in the Four Hills Kingdom, a brand new palace gate opened. The beautiful queen had arrived. She lived with her Prince Charming in a big, beautiful palace. A palace by a clean, peaceful river where birds sang and joy flowed. She ruled with wisdom, kindness, and courage. She visited her home often. She forgave her sisters. She never forgot her people. And she never forgot the river that changed everything. She was once a sacrifice, but she became a savior. She was once cast out, but she returned crowned, and she lived happily ever after. Dear viewers, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like, share with your friends, and turn on the post notification bell so you'll be the first to know whenever we upload a new video. Thank you for watching.